Hey, how you doing, guys? David Duford here at DeFord Insurance Group. The purpose of this video is to give you my complete rundown of how I have built my multi-million-dollar DeFord Insurance Group agency from scratch, and to give you some advice, some wisdom on what steps you need to do to basically do the same. I'm going to break down the process that I use, and probably at certain intervals actually share my process on the screen with you. In a way to better communicate what that all actually looks like, from finding agents to training them to building them up, and while also avoiding the very common pitfalls that come with agency building that your MLM agencies don't want to talk about. So sit back, take notes. If you like this content and you're on YouTube watching it at a later event, please feel free to like this, comment. And if you're interested in selling final expense Medicare annuities or ACA with DeFord Insurance Group, check out daviddeford.com. Okay, so getting right into this, I've got my little notes here, which is a check stub. So I just kind of wrote down some ideas here, but all I need is a few bullet points to do what I need to do. So the best thing to think about agency building is this. First of all, I really think that anybody who's listening and watching this, you need to understand that agency building is something that comes later on in your career, not in the beginning. Now, obviously, there are people who don't listen to that, and there's probably some people who don't listen and actually have success. But the reality is that if you start agency building too soon, chances are you're missing out on a lot of important developmental firsthand experiences that later on, when it counts as you scale and get bigger, and really when it comes to retaining the a good talent, you're going to have a really hard time doing it because your background is only in recruiting people, not actually being in the field, going head to head with prospects. And I'll give you a case in point from this morning. And we're doing an interview for a success story in our final expense face-to-face program. And this particular gentleman was approached by a very well-known MLM agency. You've all heard of the company before, and basically was pitched on the idea, tried to be sold on the idea of joining their agency. And he said, and this guy wrote like 3,000 or 4,000 in premium his first week with us, which is fantastic. Very good success story to start with. But he said, and this is my point, very talented guy, lots of potential. He's just tapping into the beginnings of it. But he said to me when he was talking to that recruiter, he could tell right away the guy was running a script on him. He really didn't have any experience. He had less than a month's experience in the business. He may not have even sold the first policy. And his immediate reaction was, I don't know about this guy. This sounds like an MLM scheme, or it sounds like some kind of, this doesn't sound right. And that instigated him to do research, ultimately coming across what we do at DeFord Insurance Group. And the moral of the story here is this. You don't want to be that guy that's recruiting, that doesn't have any street cred, that doesn't have 6 to 12 months of minimal experience selling it, going through the ups and the downs. Your ability to recruit the top tier talent that's really going to pay you, that can like discern between those people who know what they're doing and don't and not. You're not going to recruit those people. You're going to recruit the lower grade talent that writes a policy here or two and then leaves you with a bunch of chargebacks. So my first kind of rule here, or piece of advice as we get into agency building, is understand that there's a time and a place for it. And in my humble opinion, it's not as a brand new agent. For me, I didn't start building my agency until 2 years of ups and downs. I'd failed out of the business after a year even, and getting back on my feet, because I felt at that point I could convey firsthand experience of what it was like to actually sell successfully and fail too, which I think is valuable for agents to know not just what to do, but also what to avoid, right? So that's a big, big thing. There's a time and a place for agency building. So let's imagine you're out there and you're ready to start recruiting, or we fast forward in your career and you kind of get the ideas of what I'm talking about. Like, hey, Dave, yeah, I've experienced, I've had some success, I've had some ups and downs. What do I need to do at that future point, or at this current point, if I filled that description, to build an agency that actually gets results? So the best thing I can tell you is to think about agency building almost exactly like you think about selling successfully. There's a large correlate between what you do to sell insurance as what you do to recruit agents. There's some subtle differences and some not so subtle differences, and we'll go through those, but very much the same fundamentals of being successful in person or over the phone selling insurance applies to recruiting. So let's go over this. Well, if we think about selling insurance, what do we need to be successful? Well, Y'all need some people to talk to, right? You need a system to bring you qualified leads. You also need a system to convince that stranger to buy from you, right? And you need a retention strategy to keep the business that you closed. Likewise, the recruitment of building your agency is very much the same fundamental process with obviously some differences. So number one, you need to have a system, and we're going to go into detail about how my systems work. I'm going to share my screen, show you some information you might find useful, but we're going to go into a detailed analysis of all of this stuff to better understand it. But number one is you need a system to generate candidates and to generate interested prospects. That's number one. So where are you going to go to find interested people who want to join your agency? There's all sorts of places to go. Again, we'll get into that momentarily. I go the organic route. We predominantly recruit our agents from social media. It's been an absolute amazing platform. I've been building it for 9 years. I hope it works with all the time that I spend on it. But that's one way that you can do that. There are other paid ways. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you got to have a system that brings you consistently, like clockwork, people who will actually want a job or a career or an opportunity and have the right character traits too. To join your agency and mesh with your culture that you have in your agency. You also need a recruiting process, and this kind of bleeds into how your agency is positioned, what your unique selling proposition is, or why somebody would want to work with you. You need to define those variables. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, but there needs to be a process in how you recruit or who you recruit, and making sure it's well defined and that you have a particular strata or categories of who you want, who makes a good fit for your agency. I'm going to talk about at length about what we've been through at the Ford Insurance Group, how we've become more selective with the agents we recruit and why we've become more selective. And I think it's the best decision I've ever made. So more on that in a minute. You also need to have a system, like a system to sell insurance. You need to have a system or a blueprint to hand to an agent to go out there to learn, to implement, and then to ultimately execute on, in order to take the concepts of what you're selling them in the recruiting process, which is, hey, I've got a system to make you a lot of money if you'll just go work, right? In short, is kind of what we all say. But you've got to actually have a system to put that idea or that strategy into place and execute at scale. That's another thing we'll get into. It can't be a system that is like super cool and unique. I've got a friend in the business. He writes millions of dollars in final expense over the phone, doesn't pay a dime for leads because of his unique setup. We'll talk more about that, but it's entirely unscalable process because his asset, his website that generates these leads, is entirely and utterly unique to him. So so if you were to ask people, yeah, make a bunch of websites to do this, it's hard pressed that you're able to do that effectively. So it's got to be scalable and it's got to be duplicatable. Okay. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. And then the last thing I think you need for sure is definitely a ladder to run on, or a track to run on, or a process to grow towards. It's not enough, I think, nowadays to run an agency where you have one product and there's no hope of growth, or there's no like long-term projection in the business model. You need to have other product lines or management opportunities or duplication agency building opportunities to give those best agents that you have a perspective of a long term of what it's like to work with your agency to grow a career, not just a job, not just a pit stop in their long life of work, but they actually have multiple opportunities to grow in the short and long term that give an opportunity for a very long-term, fruitful and profitable relationship. We'll talk about what I do in order to do that and make that a reality, and the different ways that I've executed and some examples of how I think it's helped retain talent in my agency that much longer. And then we'll talk about some other issues like designing your agency. It's really important to develop a brand, develop a really well-defined unique selling proposition, what makes your agency different, why somebody would want to work with you versus all the other people that are out there, other agencies are out there. We'll talk about some things I do and maybe give you some ideas on how to implement on your own. And then the last thing is kind of my last appeal, as I started with, the appeal to avoid and ignore the MLM allure of recruiting people to recruit other people to recruit. this fantasy for most, as it stands, not a reality, of recruiting anybody with a pulse and hoping it turns out. It just doesn't work that well in this business for the vast majority of the good people that come into this but believe this stuff. It does work for the people at the top of the food chain, but rarely for the people at the bottom or even the middle. And so again, I'll talk to you kind of why that's bad, the realities of it, and what you can do instead, and kind of relate it to how my model of business works and how I've recruited, not on the basis of recruiting other people, but to give them a pathway of success, to give them a blueprint to sell insurance successfully, which is what many people ultimately end up getting into this business to do. Okay, so let's start from the top. And none of these are any particular order. You need to have all of these factors I've described to have a successful agency. Of course, as an agency builder, you're always going to be working on refining, improving, and scaling everything we're talking about here. It's a labor of love. It's never complete. And it's always something that if you're passionate about this business and passionate about helping people, you should be putting a lot of effort constantly into developing these platforms, these different traits of a fundamentally sound agency to give your business the best chance of success. So let's get right into it. So how do you find people? There are lots of different ways to find talent. The good news is that the insurance business is generally recession resistant. I won't say it's recession proof, but the nice thing about recruiting insurance agents, especially in bad times, like perhaps what we're going to go through here, you hear about all these bank failures, et cetera, going on, talks of inflation going through the roof, is that during bad times, people lose jobs. And it's when people are out of their jobs that they're now more open-minded than ever to looking at alternative ways to run a career or do a business. Case in point, when I started in the insurance business, I was in personal training, had a personal training gym, was not doing too well because the Great Recession hit. And by 2010 to 2011, I knew my days were numbered in personal training. So I started looking for other opportunities, and lo and behold, stumbled across Final Expense and just was amazed at how awesome of an opportunity it was. And therefore, I got into this business under similar circumstances where what I thought was secure and safe ended up getting blown out of the water, which opened my mind to more opportunities. So the cool thing about this business, first of all, is that even with bad things happening up over the next couple of years, potentially, who knows, right? I mean, I stopped trying to predict things. I just don't know. The insurance business is sound. And more people will be coming into this business because the need for insurance is never ending. I doubt that it's going to be fully automated. People are going to need and want insurance agents to help them make good decisions, especially seniors when it comes to Medicare, annuities, retirement planning, final expense, et cetera. Nobody's figured out how to duplicate what an agent can do. And that's essentially job security. And then, of course, there are certain markets like final expense, seniors, baby boomers. That market is growing in size as a percentage of the population. And as people shift into that age range, their priorities shift, and now they're more open-minded. So there's a nice coalescence or commingling of great opportunities, I think, to recruit, and also in certain markets where there's just more and more people that are willing to look at what we have to sell. So how do you find them? So first of all, you can do an organic or a paid way to recruit. So I'll talk about what I don't do first, and then I will then shift gears and kind of show you from a 1,000-foot view how I do things in an organic way. So the first way, which does work, it takes a lot of effort, is the paid route. So when we say paid, what I mean by that is to go to some sort of job board, ZipRecruiter, Indeed, Craigslist, others, and put out job postings about your opportunity and what you do, and then drive them to some sort of landing page where you have what I would recommend, or there's a lot of ways to convert that traffic. We'll maybe save that for the next process. But the point is you're paying your way to attention. You could also utilize social media in a paid lead strategy or paid way where you market your opportunity to drive those people to your channel, to your landing page, et cetera. What's the upside of this? Well, if you're on job boards, you're hopefully talking to people who are interested in making a change, that are open-minded to seeing what opportunities are out there. But the downside is you got to pay for access. And a lot of the people, while you get interest at scale, isn't going to necessarily be the most high intent type of lead. while they're looking at your job ad, they're looking at probably other people who are posting their final expense, life insurance, whatever type of insurance sales opportunity too. So there's a little bit more competition for eyeballs, and there's a lot more sifting and sorting through the interest that you collect in the process of getting people interested. So I don't purposely, I should say, I don't subscribe to that methodology. Part of it is because the organic strategy just works so really friggin' good. When you figure out how to do it and you execute it continuously for months and if not years on end, it is an unbeatable strategy that just builds up in such a way that is just unrecognizable to any other way and has so many other advantages. And we'll get to that more in a minute. Other paid strategies that can also work. You can also go to list brokers and that own names and licensing information on insurance agents. You can email blast a list, work with marketing companies and create creatives to market your opportunity directly to licensed agents who own a license or have a license that are X amount of years licensed, maybe even have certain carriers. So maybe you can do a particular targeting campaign to agents that you know are with a bad agency or with a low commission insurance carrier, and you want to offer them something else. So there's a lot more creativity in that regard. I've never really done anything like that. I'm actually about to start a test for that. So here in a couple months, I'll let you know how it goes. But I like that strategy because you can kind of get more granular with your market. And it's not necessarily a big, a big picture, like cast a wide net approach, like the job board kind of strategy. It does cost a good bit of money though. But the goal there is just to scale the attention. And in that strategy, you get to do it a little bit more on a niche basis and target specifically people who are licensed. If you go the job board route, you're going to get mostly unlicensed people and maybe a few licensed people, but you got to take those people through the process of getting licensed. That adds more time onto the whole onboarding process and getting them up and running. So let's talk about what I do and what I like to do. And I think there's plenty of opportunity in the space if you have an openness and willingness to put yourself out there on a public basis. So my entire system to generate leads is completely based off of organic strategies. 80% of my agents come from YouTube. The remaining 20% probably come from web searches, that kind of thing. You know, they go into Google and find some blog posts that I wrote. And then eventually I find a way to capture their information and then create a relationship with themselves or with them. I love YouTube because YouTube is a fantastic way to create relationships at scale. One of the things that's great about YouTube on a video platform, although I'm sure Instagram, TikTok, Facebook all have kind of the same, there's probably something similar about those too. The beautiful thing about YouTube is I'm able to, by the time I talk to a candidate, they already like me, they feel like they know me, and they have a good sense of trusting me because they've spent sometimes hours upon hours listening to me talk about different opportunities, my perspectives in the business. All the while, they've had the opportunity to assess whether what I say is legit or not. And couple that with the fact that I've been doing it for so long, there's an air of authority that comes with it that is really that is hard to compare when you don't have that same presence. So for me, on a recruiting basis, YouTube is where it's at. I would recommend anybody here who's serious about recruiting to build a YouTube channel and to display your wares and what it is that you do on some level on a consistent basis. Another thing about YouTube that's powerful is has a long tail and more of an evergreen content strategy. One of the things I gripe about, like an Instagram post or TikTok even, is that stuff is like here today, gone tomorrow. It doesn't stick around. I have people who comment 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, that they just saw my video I did with my wife about how the business worked and how the frustrations were in the beginning. And it just continuously gets views, and it has this huge impact that if she and I made a video on Instagram, it would have lasted for a day or two and then been forgotten, right? So YouTube is powerful in that regard because if you put a lot of content out and people do searches for it, it will pop up, people will watch it, and it creates this opportunity to go back in time to see what you're about, to see the level of consistency and kind of where you've been and where you've grown. And it allows you to create personal connections with people. It takes out that whole corporate speak and impersonalness and actually create personal relationships, again, on scale. And YouTube's almost like being a celebrity that nobody knows. Like in this business, where I've come to is everybody knows me, but I can walk around out in public and I still have a sense of anonymity, right? So it just has it checks all the boxes in what you want in an organic and even just a general recruiting strategies, ability to build a relationship with people. But what's the big drawback? The drawback, it takes time. It's scary for some people to get on camera. I was talking to a lady yesterday who I sincerely believe could be a great content builder in the annuity space. And she's fearful of just being on camera. And a lot of us have imposter syndrome. You know, I don't know anything. You know, I don't want to, you know, be made fun of or have haters. But yeah, so what? There's always trolls and people who are, you know, it is what it is. You just got to get over it. I mean, I'm sure I've got plenty of haters, and I know I do. But it's not the end of the world. Who cares what they think? They're negative people. You know, you just got to get over it. So, but that's also a good thing because that keeps the competition out. Her like, well, I don't know about being on camera. It's kind of nervy, et cetera. Well, good. I'm glad you think that way. In a sense, I think that because that just means more ability to create more content that other people see. Whereas if it was easy and everybody would be doing it, there wouldn't be nearly as much content, or sorry, nearly as much opportunity because there'd be so much available, right? So that's part of the reason it's such a great opportunity. And you don't need a big channel either. I have mentored several agencies that are a part of the Ford Insurance Group that are self-branded, that have, you know, channels in the 1,000 to 3,000 subscriber range. They consistently get referrals, people who watch their content. And it's not like they're super popular. I mean, they're popular enough, but they're consistently getting interested candidates and recruits all the time, every single week, because they put out content consistently and it resonates with the people that they watch them, and they want to be a part of their agency because of it. Now, what kind of content would I put out? My advice on content, if you're going to go and this would be true if you're going to do YouTube. And guys, you can do Instagram, you can do TikTok, you can do Facebook. There have been people who have crushed it on those platforms. There are MLM agencies on all of those that do very, very well, for example, that recruit. It's not so much that they're MLM, that's the point, but they're on these platforms and they're developing relationships with people. And the fundamentals of that, despite them being an MLM, means that the stuff actually works. Therefore, it's duplicatable. So my advice for content is to create world-class content from the heart. Restrict yourself to talk about only things you know about. Really think about your audience. What is it that they want to see? What is it that matters to them? And create content to the best of your capability that answers the fears and concerns and questions that they have. That's really the only guiding principle I've ever had in creating content on YouTube. I thought about, well, what do the agents want to see? Well, training sucks, so I'm going to talk about topics related to getting better at selling insurance. And I've done it consistently, and it actually works because people have questions about handling objections, what leads are best to buy, what products are best to sell. And my job is to help them and sell them, or not to sell them, but to help them understand that stuff. And what's cool about giving information away for free, like I have, is that the strategy at the end of the day is that people who will watch me and think, man, if this guy's giving so much free information away, he really cares and wants to help people. What's it like working for him, right? So it's like I'm selling myself without even having to sell myself, right? Because I'm giving value, extreme value first. And that's why I've always committed. And I would say for anybody here, if you're looking for a strategy to build a channel and you're like, well, I don't know what works, give away everything you've ever learned for free. Don't expect anything in return. And what you'll find that happens is that over time, people notice that. People who watch you for a couple months or years start to feel like, wow, this guy knows his stuff, or this woman knows her stuff. Let's work with this person on some basis. A grander example of my strategy, and that's what I build everything I've built on, is Alex Hormozi. Have you guys heard of Alex Hormozi? I'm sure you guys have, right? Probably one of the fastest business-oriented channels that have grown on YouTube in the past year. If you go look at his earlier work, his camera stuff wasn't the greatest. His audio wasn't the greatest. I mean, just like subpar, below average editing. But what resonated and what really, I think, pulled in the interest is that his content was so deep and so awesome. You could not even get it anything nearly equivalent to what he provided. Yeah, I don't watch much of her, but I'm aware she's kind of in the same boat, right? And so think of that, you know, a guy who wasn't even known in 2021 even started producing content in 21, 22, and almost has 1 million subscribers. Granted, it's a different animal than insurance sales, but it's the principle and the fundamentals that make the difference. And I kind of wish he would do more of that content again. It's kind of gotten away from that personally. I like watching his content, but his older stuff is to me the best because it's what I always like, which is just sheer content and value that really makes a difference in people's life without any expectation of anything in return. And if you can principally follow that, y'all, and help and have the agents with their help in mind, front and center, give everything away on all of these platforms, you will find an audience because there's always a demand for training. There's always a demand for guidance and clarity in this business because it's confusing, it's frustrating, it's full of crooks, it's full of people that'll rip you off. And there's a lot of people who are just flat out bad actors, a lot of bad influences. So recruiting and building a content strategy around being the opposite of that is a surefire way to do really well in this business and to become ultimately like what I've become. I'm not patting my own back here, but people think of me like I'm like a big deal. I'm a big influencer, you know, and I'm just filming video from my home and doing my thing. That's how I think about myself, but people care what I think. It's weird. But that's what happens over time is it grows into something more than just recruiting. It grows in this, like you're actually an asset to the business that helps people survive and do well. And it's a nice little added higher level accomplishment than just building a business. So there's ways that I think social media and using it correctly with the right intent go even further than maybe your initial goals to build. Not that there's anything wrong with just building. I mean, that's the whole point of it, right? So, yeah. So last thing I'll say on organic strategies, figure out I would recommend one platform. I don't think you should do and I'll be kind of like 50-50 on this. I think it's better I'm a big Pareto principle guy. You know what that is? 80% of your effort should be spent on 20% of that one thing that makes the biggest difference. And with that said, when it comes to social media marketing, pick the channel or the platform that you absolutely love and are on all the time. And like, you just feel so compelled by. Like for me, I've always been a YouTube guy. I hate Facebook. I begrudgingly use it to post occasionally. Same thing with Instagram. Definitely hate TikTok. Never even want to be on that platform. That's just me. I'm not judging y'all, just me. So I spend all my time and develop content on the platform I intuitively understand and know. Does that make sense, y'all? And you should be doing the same. It may not be YouTube. It may be Instagram. It may be TikTok. It may be these other social media platforms, but do the thing that you have a natural strength towards, right? The other thing I'll say that is effective is that as you film content, if you go that direction, is to multi-purpose. And this is kind of where my 50-50 kind of like, I don't know, depends on the day kind of thing. You can repurpose content across multiple platforms. And that's what I do on Instagram. It's what I do on TikTok. I should say someone does on TikTok for me. And some of the other platforms like Facebook. I don't actually create unique content for those channels anymore. I just take from my interviews or other long formats that I do on YouTube and then just copy and paste it on those other platforms. It seems to do well. I get consistent followers from it, but it's a way to save time because one of the things that you'll find if you do an organic strategy, really, if you just recruit at all, is that you'll be in a position where your time is just not as freely available. So you have to utilize your time in a wise way where you get the most bang for your buck. And not everybody's going to watch every second of your video. Some of them will just watch a little bit of it, but they won't watch the third, after the second half or whatever. But you can repurpose that content, put it on other platforms, and have other eyeballs see it and get more leverage out of your one piece of content. So it's a way to just be more effective and I think arguably efficient. But still, I think owning and really developing one platform is the critical aspect to developing eyeballs, traffic, and interest and relationships with people. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? You want to throw them in the chat? You're welcome to. Happy to address any questions you want to raise your hand to. If you're watching this live on Zoom in the Insurance Sales Success page, daviddeford.com/ISS. If you're watching this at a future date, we do live trainings a lot, almost 4 to 5 times a week. And this is filmed there live, so you can join there. Okay. So if you've got questions, post them. Next on the list here is the recruiting process. So here's the thing. What do you do when somebody says they're interested in sales, right? You're selling insurance. Well, you got to convince them that their interest is valid, that there's a need and a desire, and that not waiting is a bad idea, that buying today is the best idea, and you're the person to do it with. So they got to trust you. You got to have a process to recruit people on, and you got to have their commitment in a way that is systematic. Likewise, recruiting is the same thing. When you got people who are interested, you got to take them through a process of building a relationship, getting their trust, and explaining to them why your opportunity is worth bypassing other opportunities, right? Because your candidates have a choice. They can go work with you, but they can go work with a lot of other places, not just in the insurance business, but in other businesses too, right? So you really have to create a compelling offer, a compelling pitch. And I wouldn't say necessarily pitch like a sales pitch, but you've got to be able to explain what your opportunity is and why it's a great deal and what could come from it. So you really have to refine, you really have to define what it is that you guys stand for, what your agency stands for. You need to build onto it. Who is your, again, this kind of comes back to your agency unique selling proposition. For example, who's a good, what is it that your agency stands for? So like for me, what I talk about mostly on my platform for social media is final expense. We do other products too, but the vast majority of our agents come through the final expense channel. So what I'm constantly spending 80% of my time hitting on is final expense. I want to be known as the place where agents go preferentially to get the best chances of success selling final expense in person or over the phone. So my niche has always been in the final expense space. The extra layer of niche of what we provide that's unique, here's my unique selling proposition, is that our mentorship and our training is second to none. We provide the best world-class training available to anybody who wants to sell final expense. We have one-on-one mentors who are tenured in the business. We go through one-on-one meetings multiple times a day, daily huddles every single day to help refine your script, role play, get you confident, get you competent, so that in 7 to 10 days, you are in the field making money. That is our commitment to fast action and to getting you results, but having your back, a coach in your corner while doing that, because the opposite is true for the rest of the business. Very few people have mentors. Most people are thrown to the wolves. And very often the uplines are inexperienced or have no experience and frankly don't even care about your success or not because they're committed to the Kool-Aid MLM mass recruiting model. So I say all this because I guess I'm pitching you maybe, but I'm also showing you and painting the picture of who's a good fit for me and who's not a good fit, right? So the person who doesn't value training, somebody who wants to do MLM should go that direction. But the person who values training, understand coaching is important, especially with 90% plus of the business of agents failing in their first year, they're going to find a perfect home with what we do. What we do is probably highly likely going to match what they require. So you have to have that well-defined before you start selling somebody on it. You cannot, y'all, get into this business and be like, I've got contracts, I've got high commissions, join me. That is the worst thing you can do because it's like the Walmart effect. Anybody want to be the lowest price leader in the business? Or like, think about it this way. If you're running a store, do you want to have the lowest prices? Here's why I don't. Because the only reason people will shop with me is because of low pricing. If my pricing is higher, then they'll just go to, instead of Walmart, Aldi's down the street or something, right? I'm just trying to think of some examples. Your only loyalty stems from having the lowest prices. In the commission world, if all you do is offer high contracts or perceptively high, but nothing else, the only thing that's going to commit agents to you is the perception of a high contract, and they will flip on you when they find one that's a little bit higher, because there's nothing else binding that relationship together besides price. So I think of the high commission strategy in recruiting, where that's all that's talked about, is contingent to like the Walmart strategy. It's very thin margins. It's not a great loyal prospect, and it takes mass quantity of recruitment or mass volume to make it profitable. Just like Walmart needs a lot of sales to make a margin on 1 or 2% or whatever their margin is. I think it's that thin. And it's likewise the same way. And that's why MLMs do it, because they do the mass recruiting, because that's where the margin is at. I think what you guys should do instead, this is what I do. You should create a USP that's around something other than the commissions. You should have good commissions, right? But they don't have to be the highest. I like to inject value into my proposition. And for me, it is training. That's all you'll hear me talk about 50% of the time, because I want somebody who wants that. But maybe your proposition is you've got an awesome lead program, right? Maybe it's free leads. You know, we're the king of free leads, right? Our proposition is you don't have to worry about figuring out where to get leads. We got them for you, right? That's another strategy. Also, maybe your strategy is you're the queen of final expense telesales. You know everything possible there is to know about final expense telesales, and people work with you because you're the profound expert on final expense telesales, right? So you got to think not only just in the offer, like commissions, training, support, leads, et cetera, but also in your niche. Along those lines, what I wouldn't recommend is being the place where you can do everything. Because what'll happen is that you'll get people who want to do everything. And this is something I have contended with, because a couple of years ago, I started opening the opportunities in the Medicare and ACA and annuities. And I have some back and forth on that, to be honest with you, because sometimes offering something, while it may expand your business, it also disseminates the prospect that is most profitable for your business and where your strengths really lie. And so for us, you know, I think about, you know, how many people are we, and we try to put some processes together in the agency to detract people from initially doing Medicare, ACA, or annuities, because there's a lot of problems with starting with those, partially because it's a slow pay product with annuities, not annuities, well, a little bit with annuities, but more of a slow commission and lower first year commission with ACA and Medicare, and annuities is kind of a multi-step slower sales cycle. It's not ideal for 90% of new agents getting into the business that need to make money yesterday. So we try to have these conversation points to steer people away from those. But what I will tell you is it's a lot easier when you can say, hey, this is my thing. This is what we specialize in. This is why you should do it if you like what we're talking about. The more specialized you can get and the more specific you can talk about your mastery and where your focus lies, that's going to stick out. Trying to think of some, you know, if let's say I own a Porsche, right? Am I going to want to go to Midas to get my oil change and get service? Or am I going to want to go to the Porsche specialty mechanic shop, right? I mean, I want to go to the specialty shop because my thoughts would be they probably dealt with more Porsches. They understand them and the problems they run into and how to fix them better than some generalist, right? So the more you can get specialized on your offering and what you do, it really lifts all boats. And I think it makes the business easier in a sense, because it's better now to identify the best candidates. So let's talk a little bit about that. So there's a couple of ways to recruit. Man, time flies here. So much to talk about. Is this interesting? Hope you guys are enjoying this. Not a lot of comments here. I see a few of them, but there's so much to talk about agency building. So I'm trying to get through it to be detailed, but not too much. So yeah, thank you. So here's the thing. One thing I implemented in my agency this year, really the end of last year and more so this year, is we now heavily qualify our candidates. What we did prior to this, and you shouldn't do this, is we had down the product. You know, our pitch was pretty clear. join us for great training for final expense telesales and face-to-face. And then we got Medicare ACA annuities later as you develop your career. But the problem we had is after we recruited them, there was no obligation the agent had. They would just join. They can study at their leisure. There was no deadline in getting started to take action. There was no accountability. And so we actually recruited probably about 70 to 80 agents a month, but a fraction of them were actually successful. And then it dawned on me what I was doing, because there were some other problems we'll talk about with, inadvertently recruiting, bad agents and the financial problems that came from that. But it dawned on me that I was spending a lot of effort recruiting people, talking to them, training them, and none of them, not none of them, but a good percentage of them never would even take the first step of buying leads. And I wanted to get rid of that. It was very frustrating spending your time on people that just didn't want to help themselves, and there's only so much one man or woman can do. You got to take that leap of faith to sell, right? So what we implemented at the end of the year, which was great, we required people to pay a $500 deposit that was refundable when agents bought leads within the first 30 days. The mentality behind that is now they're financially invested, and people will work hard to get back to zero. Like the amount of people that work really hard to pay off debt or pay off the tax man usually is a lot harder than it is to work towards making 100,000 for the first time, or getting uncomfortable making, another income leap. So if we start an agent off and now they're financially committed, we'll see a lot more come through. And then if they don't buy leads and they waste my time, well, I make a little bit of something because we keep the money. So not that I'd rather them all get their money back, but some people just won't do it and might as well make some money off of it. That was my mentality. But in the beginning of this year, we hired several very tenured agents internally, turned them into trainers, and then we completely revamped our training process to add in one-on-one mentorship. And because I'm paying them a lot of money just off of wages and bonuses, we wanted to make sure that their candidates were high quality, high caliber. And so we instituted an entire interview process, and this has been game changing. So we don't accept anybody now. It used to be you just join a Q&A. If you like it, you join and get started. Very little accountability or follow-up process for me. But now we require people to apply. We require them to send a video explaining themselves. We require them to complete a full application. And as long as the person meets our criteria, we invite them to an interview. We kind of see how they are on camera. Are they well-dressed? Are they prepared? Do they take this seriously? Do they know much about what we're about? Do they have questions? How do they sound? Right? And it allows us to assess with a level of ability if the candidate's a good quality candidate. Ultimately, what this has all come down to is I've personally decided I only want to work with people who have potential. Like there's just some people that maybe if they had 6 months, they can be successful, but we don't have that kind of time, unfortunately. We need some people who have the work ethic, the character traits, that have the desire and the willingness to be humble and work too. And so we're assessing that. In other words, we're looking for like 6s out of 10s or better, because it's easier to take a 6 and make them an 8, 9, or 10 than it is to take a 3 or a 4 and make that a 6 or even a 7, right? Like it's way easier if somebody's got the stuff already. So this interview process has been entirely game changing. It's been really interesting. We've cut our recruiting volume in half. Like I think last month we recruited 35 people, right? This is compared to like 80 to 100 prior. But every single candidate we've brought on that has gone with us, our success rates are through the roof. We've got an 80% success rate in final expense telesales, people who go through the program, buy leads, like we say, and then actually get on the phone and sell in the first week. 80% of those people make a sale. And that's the biggest indicator we're going to see long-term success is, do you make a sale in that first week? Our face-to-face program has a 95% success rate under the same attributes. So that means like 95% of our agents are selling something in their first week out after the intensive training. Why is that cool? Because we were never near that number before. I don't know what it was. I never tracked it or managed it. But the success rate that we've seen, the money I'm making and my managers are making, even with paying them wages plus bonuses, I'm making as a company way more money than I ever had prior to investing in good people to manage these processes. And I say all this because I never wanted to hire employees. It was crazy. I never wanted it, but I kind of changed my mind and realized how much of a benefit and an asset it was, not just to the company, but to my people. And that ultimately I looked in myself in the mirror and I thought, if I really care about people and I want to see the best for them, and you also know that mentorship and training is what you stand for, well, you've got to make an investment and you got to do what's right for them if that's what you truly believe. And the results have just been outstanding. So all of this story is to say this, because I've been through this whole process as an agency. I wanted to relate this to you. You got to be, and here's where it's going. You got to be very picky with who you choose to bring on. You want people who have potential, who are 6s out of 10s, and then have a process in place to train them, to coach them, to develop them, to take them to 8s, to 9s, to 10s. And the great thing that comes from this type of strategy, even if you don't have people to hire, you should do this, is that you'll create better relationships. And the relationship component is what makes an agency. And it's what gives you the most money long-term. A lot of training is front-loaded. You'll spend less time training an agent, after the first 6 months than you do the first 6 months, right? But what happens if you create a relationship with them, you meet with them, you help them, you coach them, you role play with them, those people will stand by you and stick with you because the relationship matters and they know that you've helped them out. And that's where the money is. The money, it's just like a restaurant, repeat customers, people that come in and continuously buy. You don't have to market to and spend money to find new prospects, right? So you want to create that. And I can't stress enough, because that was a big issue with me, as I never, to the extent we're engaging and really providing just superior one-on-one training nowadays, I never did that before, never to the extent we did now. And the results are like a night and day difference. I mean, I'm expecting a huge year this year, just because we're getting more people successful and we're spending less time with people who just aren't a good fit. So what can you take away from this? Only recruit qualified candidates. You got to figure out what makes a good candidate. A lot of it is character. It's not resume. Make sure you're working with people hands-on. That's the biggest advice I can give you. Nobody does it in this business. It's all in MLM stuff and people just throw you to the wolves. Do the one-on-one aspect. It takes more time. It takes more effort. It'll take time away from your own sales. But if you spend time picking the right candidates and build slowly like this, it's so good for you in the short and the long term, because you have an agent and a relationship that's very profitable. And you're not wasting your time with a bunch of wannabes that just want to act as if they're an agent. The one other thing I'll tell you about that process, to be involved with your agents, and this is what got me last year, and this kind of talks about the negative side, is that you are co-signing the debt of your agents, okay? If your agents come on and write bad business and they take that advance commission, well, now it's a chargeback and they owe that commission back. If they don't pay it, you are responsible for it, okay? And what I've seen in this business across the industry is a higher rate of financial fraud committed by agents, not just writing, a client that just changes their mind, but people literally fraudulently completing applications. And I had it happen to me last year. I lost almost $100,000 in profit. Not I say profit, but $100,000 in commissions that I would have earned. And I'm thankful at this point in my business that I was able to absorb that with very little pain, all from one agent, maybe two agents who just did bad stuff that should be in jail, that should be locked up for white collar crime against seniors, insurance companies, and agencies. And it's a real problem. And I say all this because the first line of defense is picking good people to join your agency. Okay. If you really mentor and train people and monitor them, not micromanage, but be a part of their efforts, you'll eliminate that full fraud risk. And it takes so many people out of the business that you never hear of. And if you just are involved in your agency on a much more intimate level, it will remove that. The other thing I'd recommend too in the onboarding process, and we do this now, is we're right up front with people that we recruit. We do a background check using their ID. We do to validate their identity, to eliminate identity theft. We have a video that describes how we go after these agents that con us. How we've had one agent that did what I described, and through the effort of the carriers and others, ended up in jail for 8 years in Illinois. We actually show the summary judgment. Some of it's redacted just to protect identities. But we show the summary judgment that people are going to jail. People are getting sued civilly, criminally, that we go after anybody that pulls this kind of stunt. And what I found is it is a huge detriment to the scammers that are out there. It's y'all remember Scared Straight? Anybody here over 35? Probably remember that show? You know, what was that, back on MTV back in the day? And, you know, all the jails, all the felons would come out and talk to the kids who thought they were bad, and they'd yell at them and scream at them and scare them straight, right? So this is kind of DeFord's Scared Straight attempt. And we show them all this stuff. We showed them the documents. We showed them the summary judgments. We showed them we're serious. And then we also explained to them, we audit new business. We call clients to confirm that not every one of them, but largely the new agents, about 25% of the book of business. And we call to just thank them for their business with the company that they applied with, and then see if there's any questions. And what that does is if they're like, hey, I didn't do anything like that, it's an immediate red flag that they're being scammed. And then we go to shut the agent down. And then, you know, if necessary, file charges. So you got to do something like that, which sounds complicated, but you could handle it yourself initially. You can hire somebody to handle it a couple hours a week just to audit your books. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but it just takes one agent to lose 20, 30, 50 grand in a heartbeat. And for new agencies, you don't have that kind of flexibility, right? You're taking a huge intrinsic risk on, and you need to make sure that you're monitoring your books, because you're giving them the privilege of an advance. It's not a right, it's a privilege, and you can take it away from them. And you have every right to make sure what they're doing is above board. The other thing I'll recommend too, from a carrier standpoint, along these lines of fraud prevention, is don't use carriers that have applications that are too easy to issue. Okay. There is a carrier that all they require is a secret password from the company or from the client. And then they're approved. It's HIPAA compliant. It's compliant to sign off on bank drafts, and it gets the policy approved. You literally don't have to record anything or have any voice verification. They just take a secret password. And the company that does it, some of you know who I'm talking about. I heard of an agent getting a $250,000 chargeback from one agent. It's crazy. That's how much fraud happened. And so what you have to do as new agency owners is be judicious in who you select as far as carriers go. You want to make sure you're using carriers, and I'm very conservative now that I've been ripped off a couple of times. I only use carriers that have voice authorization applications that require two people on the phone, the client, the underwriter or three, and then the agent, right? So that we can get verification. We stay away from the carriers that make it too easy to do business. We only give those carriers or reward those carriers to agents that actually show that they're honest people. So it's something that we get to. I was talking to a couple agents yesterday, and I was like, hey, I don't know you. No offense. I don't know if I can trust you. You know, with some of these carriers, I'd like to see some production first. Then we can roll out some of these other companies that are a little bit easier to work with, because that's what it is. It's a trust business, guys. And you don't need to cut corners on that stuff, because it can destroy what is otherwise a fantastic business. Does that make sense, everybody? So be selective with the carriers that you have. Make sure that they're not too easy for the agent to complete, because then if you just find that one guy that doesn't care about your family and doesn't care about defrauding you, you're ruined for a long time. Cool. All right. So trainings and systems. So we kind of touch on this, and we're kind of at the end of this. So I'm going to kind of wrap this last bit up. It's pretty short here. Don't be the agency that doesn't do training, folks. Like, if you want to fail out of this business and just be a commodity product, just take a bunch of contracts from random people and never talk to them or provide training. It's just stupid. Even if you don't want to be like, your USP is like training and mentorship, if you don't want to go as far as I have, make sure you have some kind of training program available. You want to have at least that as a minimum a system of a script, a system of leads, and make sure that it's duplicatable. Have options, but not too many options. So with us at DeFord Insurance Group, face-to-face agents are either going to buy direct mail or Facebook leads. The career agents that are face-to-face, we provide them Facebook leads. Telesales agents pretty much only can buy Facebook leads. Now, we'll let you do what you want. I mean, we're not restricting your options, but people come to us and ask, what's good? Well, we have a limited choice of options. Too many options are a bad thing. So you want to make sure you limit the options down. Have one script that everybody does. This is a big mistake a lot of people do. Hey, here's 5 different scripts. Like, think about professional football teams or basketball teams. Do they have 5 different playbooks? No, they have the playbook, and they've got the plays that revolve around that playbook, right? Your script is your playbook. It's what you coach and train your people on. You have to have one process because it's easier to remember, and you're training people at scale. Right now, if you got to fix it and play with it, it's a living, breathing document. Things change over time. Your perspective changes. Mine has to. But don't have 50 million scripts. It's silly. Have one and run your business through that, okay? Teach on one coherent document where everybody knows what the standard is, and it makes the lives of your agents easier because now you're not having them have to ask, well, is it script A, B, or C better, right? Or likewise, should I go with leads A, B, C, D, or E, or F? Confused people don't do anything in life. You need to simplify the complex for them. That's a very important factor too in any kind of business success. All right. And then, let's see here. I think that's it for that. And then I would highly recommend that you get good at using video if for any reason for training. There are a lot of questions your agents will have, and you need to have a library of videos. And I believe a process of how to review and watch those videos so that a lot of the training can be offloaded from you having to hands-on do it and to have it compartmentalized in a video so that, again, you can scale your training, right? So not everything is appropriate for video. Sometimes you need somebody to help you. That's one thing I've discovered shifting to the mentorship model, that there's just some things better heard from a real life pro in the business than just watching another video, right? But needless to say, video is important for self-study. You can't expect in this day and age of someone 40 hours a week to train you one-on-one. It's just unlikely to happen. So you need to depend on training the factors and things that are normal and the questions people have and create video content. Again, we have video content like you guys see on the training site, on our agent-only site that goes through the script, that talks about the carriers, that discusses the major questions, and that offloads so much time from my trainers and myself so that we can focus on helping people in the moment who need help with getting a case closed, who need help with getting business issued so they get paid. And then the last thing here, and I'll open this up for questions. I'm going to run a little bit longer than 12, is you got to, I think you should have a ladder to climb. One of the differentiating factors for someone to join your organization versus another's is where can an agent go? Is it just about getting a job? Is it just a call center job, right? It's a dead end. Nobody wants a dead end when they look at a business opportunity. They want an opportunity. So like, for example, what we talk about is you can join the DeFord Insurance Group to sell final expense. But the great thing with us is we're not going to restrain your efforts for long-term career growth. There's multiple ways you can work with us. You can scale into different products, or we'll teach you how to scale the final expense business to extreme heights so you can make a lot of money that way. You can scale into different products, cross-sell Medicare, create residual passive income, also with ACA, or maybe sell big policies with annuities. So there's ways to sell different products while still kind of sticking with the main thing. So there's a way to add more and expand your career. You can also get into management. We're actively hiring internally from our ranks as we expand, and as we need more trainers, we're going to explicitly recruit from within people who understand our system, who already get our culture. We're going to put more people in the management positions so that those people who want to build, but then kind of avoid the issues like with chargebacks that many agency managers get stuck with, they're allowed to do it in a way where I provide the recruits. I understand how to recruit people, and all they're responsible for, like our trainers, is just to train people, to care about them, to be there when they need them, to create that relationship. So people come to us and they see, wow, there's a track to run on. There's a ladder to climb. There's ways to have a long-term career. And a person who's good talent, who thinks long-term, which is a great candidate to hire, you know, not just short-term, I need money yesterday thing. They're going to be attracted to that stuff because there's somewhere to go. It's not just come here and sit in the call center and just make money. What happens after that? Where do I go? What's the benefit to this, right? So we give this whole projection of where things go and what the long-term vision is. And I think, like, for example, I have an agent, John Dean, who joined me in 19 to sell final expense. Was doing great in final expense, realized, hey, Medicare is better for me. I want to create residual income. We have Medicare. He transitioned to Medicare. He's writing 100 policies a month. I mean, he's a killer. He's a workaholic. He'll tell you as much if you see him. And I may not have been able to keep him had we not had Medicare, right? So we had a pathway for that particular agent who's really good, a great example of success, to stay with us, to make money, and to build a continual long-term relationship, right? So that's our ladder to climb. All right.